In this video, I'm going to show you just how powerful the built-in 3D tools of After Effects really can be. Now, I made this animation here just using everything that's available to you in After Effects, and I want to show you exactly how I did it. Now, if you are wanting to learn the complete fundamentals of After Effects, why not check out my Motion Essentials course, where I'll take you through everything you need to know to create your own stunning projects. You'll also have access to me through the private community if you need any further help along the way. You can check that out using the link in the description below. Now, I must say that the inspiration for this shot did come from Buff Motion, and I saw their work on Instagram, which when it came to this shot, I thought this is probably made in Cinema 4D, but I want to challenge myself and see if I can recreate this just using After Effects. Now, I've just got a standard HD comp here, and we're going to go ahead and add a circle. So I'm going to go up to my ellipse tool, and I'm going to hold Control and Shift in the center, and that will just give us a proportionally scaled circle. And I'm just going to draw a rough circle in the middle. I'm going to do Control, Alt, and Home to center my anchor point, and then Control and Home to center that to my comp. Now let's rename this layer to be our coin. And the first thing we need to do is make this 3D. So I'm going to press the 3D button here, and then we can make sure that we're using the correct 3D renderer for this as well. So over here, if you click this button, we'll have different renderer options. For this one, we want to be using the advanced 3D renderer. So I'm now going to go down to my geometry options. I'm going to open that up. I'm also going to open up the material options. So on the bevel style here, I'm going to change this to be convex, and I'm going to change my bevel depth to be 10. I'm then going to go down to my extrusion depth, and we're going to set that to be 100 as well. Now you can't really see what's going on here. So let's just go to our selection tool, and we can just rotate this around, and you'll now see we have a 3D coin. Now changing the extrusion depth will change how much kind of Z depth it has, and I liked mine around 100, so you can always play with that if you want a different shape. So now we can go down into our material options, and I just want to increase the specular shininess to about 60 here, and this is what's in charge of kind of the overall reflectivity of our object. So we can increase that or decrease that, but I found 60 to be a really good option. Everything else, I'm kind of going to leave as standard, but the diffuse, I'm then going to put up to 100, just so that that comes through a little more. Now, I'm going to add a bit of color to this. Now, while we could do it up here, I actually had slightly different shades of the same color on my original animation. And to do that, we need to go to Add, and then Front and Color. But you'll see that we get an error. Now, to fix this, all we need to do is put our shape into a group. So I'm going to press OK. I'm going to go to Add and then Group, and then we can just drag this ellipse into the group. And now if we go to Add Front and Color, it will allow us to color each side individually. So I'm going to add a color to my front. I'm going to go to Add Bevel Color. We're going to do Add Side Color, and we're going to do Add Back Color as well. And in my original one, these were all set to kind of like a bluey, purpley tinge. So let's go with something similar. I'm not going to focus too much on setting this up exactly how I had it, and I'll obviously leave the colors to you. But on the bevel, I did set this one to be a bit lighter, just to give a bit of reflectivity off that beveled edge there. And on the side color, maybe let's go for more of like a purpley blue, something a little nicer, get a bit of reflectivity in this. And then on the back, I'm just going to set that with my eyedropper to be the same as my front. So now let's actually start looking at animating this scene. And don't worry, we'll begin to light it and make it look pretty a little later on. But for now, we're just going to focus on getting the animation down and getting everything looking right. So first of all, I'm going to press R on my keyboard and just reset this orientation to be 0. And I also want to change my opacity on this coin. So I'm going to press T and set that to about 70. It'll save a bit of time later when we begin to duplicate this. Now, I will also add a bit of text to this, and I'll show you how I kind of did that and made it stick to the coin, so that if you want to include that, you can. So we'll just go up to our type tool. I'm just going to select in the center, and I'm just going to create a $sign, and I'm using the Proxima Nova extra bold font for this, and that is included in the Adobe Typekit as well. So again, I'm going to do Control, Alt, and Home, and then Control Home to center that. I'm going to make this 3D, and then you'll notice it goes behind our coin. So I'm actually going to parent this to our coin layer, And then it's to really see what's going on, I'm going to need to create a camera, which we're going to need anyway. So let's go up to layer, new, and camera. And we're going to use a 2-node camera, and I'm just going to press OK. And then we're also going to create a new null layer for this. So let's go to layer, new, and null object. And we're going to rename this to cam controller. I'm going to make that 3D as well. And then I'm going to parent my camera to the cam controller. And this just gives us more flexibility and easier controls over this camera. So on my cam control, I'm just going to change the X rotation just so I can see exactly what's going on with this dollar. And we'll zoom in a little bit as well. And then I'm going to go to my dollar layer, press P, and I'm just going to bring its position to about -5, just to bring it slightly out of the coin there. So it sits on top of the front face. And then we're going to open up these options as well, go to geometry options, and again, add a convex bevel. And I'm going to leave that standard. And the extrusion depth, I'm going to set to 5. So it'll sit exactly on top of that face as we positioned it -5. I'm going to go down to the material options and again, increase the specular shininess roughly to kind of what I like. So let's go with 75. And then I can reset my rotation on this camera back to 0. So now we kind of just have this coin. So let's begin to animate this. So I'm just going to select my layers and then press U to kind of hide everything. We're going to start by getting our starting position on this animation. So I'm going to press P on my camera control, and I'm just going to bring this in until this coin kind of fills the screen, somewhere around here, and I'm going to create a keyframe. Then I'm going to go and move that over to about 1 second, and we'll leave that there for now. We're then going to animate this coin coming in, so I'm going to press P on my keyboard to bring up the position, create a keyframe, and let's move that over to about 1 second. And then I'm just going to bring this Y value down so it becomes off screen. And then I'm going to press R, and let's add some rotation to the X and Y on this. So let's create 2 keyframes here by clicking the stopwatch, and I'll drag that over to 1 second as well. And let's just drag these values and create a bit of interest on this coin. Kind of like it's a bit flatter and it's going to kind of reveal itself. So let's go up here, as I don't want this to be exactly head on. So again, let's just add some X rotation to that and a bit of Y as well, just to create a bit of interest here as well. So we're going to have this kind of coin slightly tilt up, but maybe we could add a bit more each way as well, just to give us a nice kind of move. So let's begin to ease these. So I'm going to select these. So first of all, let's make sure we have all our keyframes. So I'll select my layer and press U on my keyboard. I'm going to select all of those, press F9, and then we're going to go to our graph editor. And I'm just going to select these at the front, and I'm going to bring these all the way over, and select these at the end, and bring this one all the way over as well. And now we should have this really smooth move. But you can see something weird is going on with our rotation there. So let's just select our rotation parameters, go to the graph editor, and it's these values that have just dipped below here. So we can just bring those up back to the center. And that should fix our problem. And there we go, back to normal. So now we have this kind of smooth coin pull up. And as this coin gets to the top, I kind of want to have this camera pull back, but I think that's feeling a little fast. Maybe let's just move that over a few frames and see how that is. I kind of want this to feel like a bit slower and a bit nicer. Well, we could change the easing. I don't really want to, so I'm going to do that instead. So over about 10 seconds, sorry, one second and 10 frames, sorry. I'm going to move this position, and I'm going to move forward with Control, Shift, and right arrow, and I'm going to press my right arrow twice to move up 20 frames, and then I'm going to move over another 5 with Control and right arrow 5 times. Now, in my timeline, I'm working at 25 FPS, so doing that, I've basically moved over 1 second. I'm then just going to move this position back to, let's just start with 0 and see how it is. I kind of like that size, so let's stick with that. And I'm going to select these keyframes, press F9. I'm going to go to our graph editor, and let's just ease these keyframes as well. Let's bring each one out a little bit. Now we'll have something like this, which is looking rather nice, but it needs a lot more. So let's just start by getting the basics in, and then we'll work on making everything look even better. So the first thing I'm going to need is more coins. So let's start by doing that. Now, I'm not going to copy over the $sign just to save a bit of time, but if you want to, it's the same process. You'll just need to reparent your dollar to the new coin. So I'm going to press Control and D on my base coin here. And I'm just going to bring this below, and I'll change the color of this as well to yellow so we kind of know it's a different object. I'm going to press P on my keyboard, and I'm going to delete these position movements here. And on R, I'm going to delete that rotation as well. And we can obviously play with these values so they're all slightly different if we want to as well. But I know that this tutorial is going to go on a while, so I'm trying to be as fast as possible and keep things efficient and kind of leave the extra touching down to you. So I'll press P on my keyboard and we'll just move over on the X just to roughly where we want another coin. And a little trick here to kind of have multiple of these all rotate around in a circle is what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new null. So we're going to layer new and null object, and that'll be immediately central. I'm going to make that 3D. And I'm then going to duplicate this coin I have here. So I'm going to do Control and D, and then I'm going to parent the new coin to the null. Now my null, I'm going to have 6 coins around the edge here. So let's go into our, is it Y rotation? No, it's our Z rotation. And I'm going to type in 360 divided by 6. And that'll rotate it the exact amount I need, which is 60. So I'm going to do that. Then I'm going to duplicate the coin again, and this time unparent the one on the bottom. And then I'm going to change that to 120, just adding another 60 to this. And then we'll duplicate the next one and unparent it. And then we can just add plus 60 to that, which takes us to 180. And again, duplicate, unparent, and 240. And the last one, duplicate, and then unparent. And that'll take us to 300. So now we have 6 coins evenly spaced around our object. And then we can just delete that null as we no longer need it. And all our anchor points are still perfectly central. Now there is something that I did forget to do, which will cause issues with our rotation. So let's just fix that. So let's select all of our coins. And I'm going to press A, because if you see, let's just rotate one of these coins here. And I'll just show you the issue. You can see that our anchor point is actually on the front face of this and not directly in the middle. So that when we rotate this, it's going to rotate around the front face and not the center of the object. I'm going to Control Z that. And I'm just going to select all of my coins, press A to bring up the anchor point, and I'm going to set that to 50 in the Z. And that's going to push it back halfway because we extruded it to be 100 in the Z. So let's set that to 50, and I'll just push all our coins forward a little bit. And then I'm going to press R, and of course we can play with all these rotation values on these coins as much as we like and create a bit of different interest around these coins so they're not all the same. And this is generally just kind of art directing it, how you want it to be. There's no right or wrong answer. So again, I'll leave that down to you. I'm just going to select everything with Control and A and then press U just to hide all of my layers. So now we kind of have this. And then all of our coins are going to come in and push back, which is quite nice. So now I want, a little after this shot, I want these coins to kind of rotate and go in on themselves. So maybe after this has had a little pause, we'll go somewhere around here. And all of these coins, I want to begin to move inwards. So I'm going to select all these, press P on the keyboard, and create a new keyframe. Then I'm just going to move over maybe about 20 frames. So Control Shift and right arrow twice. And I want to center these. So these are all going to change to 960 by 540. And that'll center it exactly into the start of, well, exactly into the center coin so that these will fan inwards. Of course, we need some easing on this. So let's select all of those, press F9 and go to our graph editor. And let's have these kind of ramp up quite a little bit. And maybe we'll not have them ramp so much on the end. Let's kind of see what that's going to look like. And of course, we're going to add a bit more interest to this rather than just that. So as these are moving inwards, I actually want them to rotate and I want them to go kind of sequentially one by one. So we need to offset all of these. So let's organize our coins with the one that I actually want to start with. So they're already in a pretty good order. So let's select all of these. And there's a new thing in After Effects we can do, which I believe is Control and Alt. And if I select everything, hold Control and Alt, we get this new icon. And this is in the latest version of After Effects. So let's make sure everything's selected, and I hold Control and Alt, and I can drag these layers over. Now it's dragging it the wrong way. So I actually want to select my coins in the reverse order, and then Control and Alt, and I've done it wrong again. So let's go from bottom to top, and then Control and Alt, and now I can drag these over, and it's telling me how long I'm moving them. So let's do about 4 frames, and that's actually 1 frame. So let's move it about 3, and I'll line my second one up to be with that. So we're going to have that kind of move now. And I want to add some rotation to all of this as well. So let's add some rotation to this. So let's press R on our keyboard on the Y, and then I'll create a keyframe. Then we'll press U, go to our end frame here. And I want that to have done 1 whole rotation. So I'll just change the left value to be 1. And now it'll kind of spin in. And let's add a bit nicer easing to this. And I'll press F9 and we'll go to our graph editor and we'll just drag these out a little bit, just so that they're gonna spin in as it moves in. So let's just check that one. And I don't like it starting so early. So let's actually just copy the easing using a free script called ease copy. And I'm gonna copy that and just paste the easing from my position over, so these will be in exact sync. And I'm going to copy this rotation with Control and C, and then I just need to paste it to my other layers with Control and V, so everything kind of happens at the same time. That's a bit of a weird one. Not sure why it's done that. So let's do Control and V, just a random After Effects error. And I'm just going to line my keyframes up that we moved to be on the whole keyframe. Not sure why it's giving me the errors, but there we go. Just After Effects things that you tend to have now and then. So let's just keep pasting it. Once I get rid of that error, it then pastes it on, which is very strange. And let's just move this last one. And I'm probably going to need to extend my comp here. I'll go to my R, and on my Y rotation, I'll paste it. I think it's because I wasn't actually selecting the rotation there. So let's just make this comp about 10 seconds as well. And I've accidentally made it 40. So let's set it back to 10. And I'll just select all my layers and drag those out. So now we're going to have all of these coins move in and then rotate, which is quite nice, but obviously we want them to vanish and not be on screen. So as it gets to this last frame, I'm just going to trim this with Alt and right square bracket, so it'll trim as it goes in. And maybe we could bring that over 1 more frame. So on this kind of end frame, I'm just going to move back one with Control and left arrow, and then Alt and right square bracket. And I'm going to do that for all of my layers here, just so that we can kind of trim these and then they get hidden and it just looks nicer and we don't take up more computing power. So now let's see where we are with all of this. So we have this, and then all of these coins fold inwards. So let's add some extra niceness to this as well. And let's finish off this main coin. So as these move in, I'm going to have my camera begin to pull forward again. So let's create a positional keyframe here. And then over maybe about 30 frames, I'll do Control, Shift, and right arrow 3 times. I'm going to push this in a bit again. Let's go up to about 1200. And I'm going to select those, press F9, go to our graph editor, and just put a bit of nice easing in there. And again, I'll leave you to play with all of these values. We can see exactly what's going on. That's going to push back, and then we're going to push forward again. Now we kind of have a base animation for this. Let's add some extra flair to it and some extra rotations, make this look a bit nicer. So as this coin moves back, I want to add a bit of rotation to it as well. So let's press R on the keyboard, and I'm just going to move forward 1 keyframe. And on my Y rotation, I'm going to create a new one. Now, the reason I'm doing this is because it's actually easier to animate with a second keyframe. It won't affect our original easing, and it just makes life a little easier. So I'm actually going to do it on my X. I've got my axes confused again. And then I'm just going to set my X to be 1 on the rotation. And I'm going to copy the easing of the camera this time. Copy. I'm going to paste that to our X rotation layer. And then we have it kind of spin as it moves backwards. not sure I like that way. So let's maybe set this to maybe -1. So let me delete that keyframe, and then we'll try it with -1. And again, I'll just select both of those and paste my easing on. And I'm not sure which way I prefer. I think backwards makes more sense because we're moving backwards. But I'll leave that to you as well. And then I'm actually going to copy that exact rotation to all my other coins. So let's select all my other coins, select the top one, hold shift and select the bottom one, and then press Ctrl and V. And then that'll paste all of that on as well. So all of these coins kind of move together, which is quite nice. And we kind of have this motion. Now, it certainly feels a bit stale at the minute, and that's because our camera is stop starting, but we're going to fix that at the end as well. And then on this last one, as this camera punches forward, I'm going to create another keyframe. I'm going to have this move forward. So we're going to set that back to 0. And again, I'm going to select those and paste my easing on. We'll have this punch back, all the coins as well, and they fold in, and then that punches forward. Now, one more thing I want to add while these coins are kind of punching forward is a little Z rotation. Add a bit of interest to this. Let's go ahead and create a new null layer. And I'll bring this down to my coins. We'll make that 3D. And I'll select all my coins and parent that to my null layer. We'll create a keyframe on the Z and kind of as these animate. So let's take a look where it starts. It's about here. Let's bring this over. And as that last one begins to end, maybe over around here somewhere, let's just add 180 to that and kind of see how that looks. And I'm going to paste that same easing that I've been using on everything else to that. Now, that feels really abrupt and weird and not how I imagined. So maybe let's change that to 90 and have that a bit slower. And let's copy the easing from the actual rotations on the coins instead. Paste that and see how that would be. And that's just not what I imagined whatsoever. But it's definitely happening too fast. So let's just move these keyframes over a touch with Alt, Shift, and right arrow. And maybe actually this just needs to last a little longer. Just bring that out. Kind of just fine-tuning everything. And now the 90 doesn't feel enough, so let's go back to 180. And that's feeling a bit nicer. And I'm not sure if my null's exactly centered, which might be causing some rotation issues. Certainly feels a bit weird. So maybe I want this rotation to start and then everything else kind of starts moving in. And that feels a bit nicer. So let's just move that over a little bit. And to add a bit of difference to this, rather than the coin just flipping backwards and forwards, let's go to our main coin here. And I think I was right in the first instance. Let's delete that Y rotation and add it to our X instead. So let's do -1 on there. And I'll copy the easing off the camera again and paste that over. And you can see just how useful this ease copy script is and just how much time you can save. And that's doing some wild thing there. I'm not really sure why. That's not the direction I'm wanting to go in. And that's because our X is still animating over here. So I need to copy this keyframe here and paste that to the end. So it's the exact same. And that's feeling a bit nicer. And then on the end one, I'm going to set this to be 1. So that flips forward. Boom, and then boom. And again, let's copy that easing from the camera. Paste it over. And I'm actually going to change this to be -1. I'm not feeling the +1. My bad, it was -1. Let's go +1. And again, we'll paste that easing over. And you can see just how just playing around with things can really kind of change the feel of your animation. And that's feeling a little nicer to me. Now, it'd be nice to get some subtle motion here so it doesn't feel so stop-start. And then we can look at lighting and finalizing everything in this shot. So first of all, let's play with this camera. So I don't like how it just stops. So I'm going to move forward to where it's about to stop and just create a new keyframe. And then I'm going to move that keyframe over to the end where my other keyframe was. But I'm actually just going to keep this original keyframe back to its position. I hope that kind of makes sense. But that way, this value is going to keep moving. And we can actually change the value. So let's just, we could do this in the value graph. It would make things a lot easier. So I'm just going to select all of my camera keyframes here and copy this easing. Because when I split this by right-clicking my position and going to separate dimensions, it's going to make them all linear again. And then I can just paste that easing back on. But we don't actually need the X and Y. It's just kind of all on the Z. So if I go into this now, we can kind of see exactly what's going on. And that's really not what we want. We're getting some strange curves here. So let's kind of even all of this out and make it exactly what we're after. We kind of want like a nice movement here. And I'm just going to join those two keyframes together and then repaste my easing. Hopefully that it breaks it immediately. So let's just kind of smooth these out. We want these lines to be even so that when they kind of animate, we're animating in a nice linear motion as this camera pulls back. We want like a nice linearness to it. So let's actually tweak these handles first. That'll make more sense. Then I can pull these ones down. And you'll see how just this subtle change in the angle of our curves will just keep that motion moving. And it's just slight, but it just keeps a bit of interest in our shot. And we could actually increase this value so easily now and just tweak these handles once more. And it just keeps a bit of momentum running through our shot so that it doesn't feel stop-start and so boring. So now we have that and everything's kind of continuously moving, which feels a lot nicer. So again, we can do this for our rotation on our coins as well and keep a bit of interest on that. So on my main coin here, let's see how this moves. I'm just going to move back on the Y a couple frames and create a new keyframe. And then I'm just going to drag that over until our next move and then reposition that back to where it should be. And I actually quite like that overshoot. I actually think that's quite nice, having the overshoot and then it settle back. It kind of follows that Z rotation round, so I might actually leave that. It's kind of a happy little accident, as Bob Ross would say. If you want to, you don't need the overshoot, but I quite like that movement continuing. And I think it sets up for the next shot. Now, a couple of these coins are definitely in the shot a frame too long, so let's just fix that. Let's just go through, like, we don't want these overlapping coins either. So what I'm actually going to do is just select all of those and press P. And on our end position, I'm just going to push that back to 100 so that this coin will go behind our coin and it should make a bit more sense. Let's actually go to like 250. And this coin will then go behind our coin and it won't sit in front. So we're going to need to do that to all of those. And when it comes to this stuff, it's always just a case of like tweaking values until we get what looks right. I could just tell you the original values I used and you could just copy them, but it's not going to necessarily still give you the same output. You might not necessarily learn anything from that. You're just essentially copying everything. But if I leave you to do stuff, you'll kind of learn and pick up on new things. So, I mean, again, we could just have these come off a frame earlier. So let's just select all of these. Just drag them one frame back. See how that looks. That's feeling a bit nicer. We're going to have that. That spins. That spin carries over. We have that. And then that comes forward. And again, on the end, I'm just going to move back like 10 frames on this Z. And I'm going to pull this one over just so it runs on a bit longer. And let's just go into our easing here. And again, on the value graph, let's just even these out and get a nice linear curve going on the end there. Really important that you learn the value graph and the speed graph, just to make your life way easier. And you can see we have that kind of movement on the end now. And on this coin on the end as well, let's just keep this rotation going as well. So let's just move back a few frames from the end. And again, I'll create an X keyframe, drag that other one over to our end, and then move that over. And we can just go to our graph again and make these all linear. And let's just tweak those. So now we're going to have a lot of continued movement through this shot. And it just feels way better. Now, on second thoughts, I'm not necessarily feeling that overshoot, but I'll leave you to tweak it as you need to. But I'm quite happy with how everything else is looking at the moment. Now, one thing I would like to do is actually offset the rotation on these outer coins as well. So let's just select all of these and begin to move them over. So I'm just going to start from the bottom. And I'm going to do Alt and right arrow twice, and then deselect the last one, and Alt and right arrow twice, deselect the last one, Alt right arrow, deselect, Alt right arrow, deselect, and Alt right arrow. And now everything's kind of offset a bit more, and it feels a bit more interesting. Now I have kept those on the X, and you might want to change them back to the Y, kind of follow the middle coin. I'm not entirely sure how I feel about that. But for now, I think it's okay, and I'll leave you to kind of change everything to your liking. So we've got this really nice kind of base animation now. So let's begin to stylize it and really make it come alive. So the first thing I want to do is add some lights to this. Let's make this thing look really nice, get it all metallic. So let's go to Layer, New, and Light, and let's add an environment light. We're just going to press OK. And now this is going to use a HDRI. Now you can get HDRIs from a website called Polyhaven, and they are free HDRIs. It's where I got mine from. So I'm going to go Control and I to import it, and I'm going to use Studio Small 05, and I've downloaded a 4K EXR file. And we need to drag this into our composition for this to work. Now, don't be alarmed. It's just a light source, basically. After Effects is going to treat all of this as light in our scene. So I'm going to leave that central, and I'm then going to go down to my environment light, and in our effect controls here, or on the light options, I should say, in our source, we need to change this to Studio Small, and then that will turn that light off, and it now treats it as a light source. And you can see just how that one little thing completely changes the look of our scene. Now we can actually rotate this by pressing R on our environment light, and we can play with where our lights are going to be seen. And you can see just how much it's going to begin to change the look of our scene. Now, again, this is all going to be personal taste. And if you're not used to lighting, particularly in a 3D software, it can be quite hard to get the hang of. And an environment light is a really good way to get started, as it takes care of a lot of things for you. Now in here, you can also, in your light options, change the intensity as well, and make that really bright, or make that not do a lot. But in my shot, I actually just used 2 lights. So let's get a nice environment light set up. Something a bit interesting. And we can play with this. I might not get the exact value, so I think I was tweaking mine for quite a while. But you can see now the specular of that coin, and I'm not like a huge fan of at the minute. We definitely need a bit more light going on. So let's play with this. Have a bit of light down here would be quite nice. And pull these around a little bit. Let's just really see what's going on here. I think there's not enough on the front face now. That's quite nice. We're getting a lot of backlight, but there's not much on the front. So let me just reset these to be 0, 0 on the Y. As I want a bit more on that front face. I think I've over-rotated it. So really, it's this like starting one. Maybe over there on the right. That's feeling a bit better, but it certainly does feel too bright now. And it's always going to be a case of just kind of tweaking these until you get the look that you're after. Which can be a painful experience, but lighting is a very important thing. And I just kind of going to tweak mine until I kind of get something I'm happy with. it's still a bit too much on that front. So that's feeling a lot nicer. But what we can do is add more light into this as well. So let's go to layer, new, and let's create a light. And let's create a parallel light. And this time we can go into 2 views. And I'm going to be on my top. And you can see kind of where this light is going to be pointing. So let's go to the start here. You see my coins there, just out of shot. And we can put that on the front. Or what I like to do is use a backlight and put that around the back of our coin, and we can push this back. And I'm just going to solo this coin layer on its own, just so we can see how our light's affecting everything. And pull this down. And then let's open the light up, go to light options, and I'm going to really make this super intense. So let's go to like 500. And I can then tweak my other light a little bit. So I really want to see what's going on. So let me just turn off that environment light and I can see exactly what this parallel light is doing. We can see where it's hitting it. Now it's quite weird the way it's reacting. I'm not certain why hitting the back of it is not really affecting it as I would imagine. Maybe we just need to raise it up a touch, which seems to be working a bit better. And you can see we're getting this nice light on the edge now, which I'm really, really liking. And we can increase that intensity to really take that up. Maybe let's go to 1,000 on that and have it really, really strong. And we can just play with that position forever until we get something. Then we can reintroduce this environment light. And now we have a secondary light for that base. We can just kind of tweak that environment light. And you can see immediately we have something that looks way nicer. Now that's feeling a bit strong now on that reflection. Let's just turn that back down to 500 and desolo the coin. And now we have something that looks way more dramatic and way more interesting. And I'm going to duplicate this parallel light and solo that one with the coin, just so we can get something on the front face as well, because I think the front face is now lacking a little bit. And I'm just going to change this where it's looking at. Maybe pull it over to the right just to get a bit over here. Pull this back, and we can put that there. And then I'm going to reduce the strength of this one, maybe down to about 50. And when we reintroduce the other lights, so let's desolo those. We can obviously play with this, and you can see how that's now hitting the front face. And we have quite a nicely lit scene, and I really like this quite a lot. Now, if you really want to get really interesting and technical with this, you could actually begin to animate your lights and its positions and rotations as well. But I know this video has already gone on a while, so you could really dramatize it by doing that. But I think for me, I'm pretty happy with how this is looking. The lights have made a huge difference, and our animation's coming along very nicely. So let's now begin to finalize this and really stylize it. So I'm going to hop back to my one view, and it's time to really make this look even that little bit better. So I'm going to create a new composition, go to my project, and I'm just going to Control and N, and let's call this main. And I'm going to drag my 3D coin in here, and now we have this. And we're going to start by creating a background solid. So let's do Control and Y, and we'll call that BG. And let's add a gradient. And this plugin I'm using is FX Console, which again is free. I only use free plugins in my tutorial, so you can follow exactly as I do. It just speeds things up when searching things. So I can search for all my effects here. I'm going to do gradient ramp. I'm going to do radial. And I'm going to leave that as like a black. And then we'll make this kind of like a dark blue color. And then let's just position these points where we want them. Let's push this up to the top. And I actually want to invert those colors. We have kind of something like this. Let's kind of like follow where that light is. And now we have this kind of thing. And that just immediately adds so much more depth to our scene here. And then now, because we're not in the advanced 3D renderer, we can actually add layer styles to this as well and really stylize everything inside there. So I'm going to right click, go to layer styles, and we're going to add an outer glow. And I'm going to change this to be kind of like a blue color. And actually, I don't want the outer glow. I think I want the inner glow. Let's right click, layer styles, and inner glow. And let's change this to kind of like a nice bluey color. And if we zoom in here, change the size, you can see we're going to have like that gummy look on our coin. Kind of like a gummy transparent object. So let's just play with that color a little bit. And it just gives a bit more interest and a bit more depth to these colors. Like, that is now so much nicer and just adds that extra bit of light to everything. But if you were to add layer styles in our 3D comp, it wouldn't work, purely because After Effects can't do the 3D renderer and layer style. So this is kind of like a workaround for it. And then to my 3D coin, I'm going to add an effect called Quick Chromatic Aberration. Now, you can make this manually, but again, this is a free plugin. And I'm just going to increase this up to like 1, but you can take this really intense. And it splits our red, green, and blue layers. Just adds that bit of natural kind of thing you would get with a camera. And depending on how you want to change this, you could really stylize the look and go kind of crazy with it. It's just an easier setup rather than doing this manually. So I'm going to leave that at 1, at 2, sorry, on the scale. And I mean, you can skew this and do all sorts with it. It's a really, really cool plugin. And you can see just by turning this off, it really adds a lot of interest to our shot. Makes things a little bit nicer. So now let's also add another effect to this layer, and we're going to add a light sweep. And that's because at the end here, I want this coin to kind of light sweep over. So as this comes in, we're going to keyframe this light sweep to happen. So let's set up our light sweep, and I'm just going to increase the width of that. And maybe change the intensity a bit lower. I want it to be quite subtle. Maybe let's have it smooth rather than sharp. Reduce the width. Maybe we'll go back to sharp and re-increase the width, change the intensity. And all we're going to do is drag this little cursor here, and I'm going to change the start point. So we're going to keyframe the center, and then I'm just going to move forward about 30 frames or to around, a few seconds in front. And I'm just going to drag that center over, press U on my keyboard to see that, and now we kind of have that nice shine. And if we wanted to, we could just add some basic easing by selecting those keyframes and pressing F9. And obviously you could tweak that and have some different easing. I was trying to paste mine, but we might have to go to the speed graph for that. And we could just tweak this and add a bit more interest to everything. Kind of shimmers over, which is quite nice. And again, I'll leave that for you to play with. But to make sure it's not on at the start here, so you can see it's kind of overlapping our layers. I was pointing at my screen like you were in the room with me. We just need to animate the opacity on this. So let's change the sweep intensity and edge intensity on this. So let's just keyframe both of those, press U. And I'm just going to move that back 1 frame with Control and left arrow. And I'm just going to set both of those to be 0. So now it'll basically flick on, and we won't have that at the start. Kind of have that, and then that kind of sweeps over. I'm still not a fan of that sharpness. Maybe we can just change that and change it to be smooth again. It's all personal preference, but then I'm not too keen on the smooth, so I'll leave that to you. I'm not going to dwell on it too much at the moment. And then let's add a bit more to this. So let's Control and D on this coin. And I'm going to delete the effects of this one on the top. And I'm going to press F4 to go to my blending modes. And I'm going to change this to be add. And I'm going to press T, and we're going to drop the opacity to be about 20. Now I'm just going to soften all of this out. So let's add a fastbox blur to this. And I'm just going to set that to be about 2. And then I'm going to add a glow effect. And we can tweak the threshold and intensity on this one as much as we like to. We need a bit more in there. And if I just solo this layer, you'll kind of see we're just adding a bit of softness to all the edges here. Just soften everything out. Give it a bit more interest. Without that, you can see I actually might prefer the first version, but in my original, I did kind of add this on. Maybe I'm just doing a bit too much. So let's just keep tweaking that. And I might stick with the original in this case, but we can play with it as much as we like. Maybe I'll just reduce the softness, increase that threshold. And I'll just decrease the opacity a bit more. Maybe I don't want it to interact as much. Just adding a bit of softness to everything. And then I'm just going to add the CC glass effect as well. And I'm not going to change the bump map. Maybe let's just set that to original. It's going to be very subtle, is this effect. You can see on the edge here. Just adding a little more softness, a little more depth to everything. And we can play with those settings if we want to as well. And you can see, because I'm referencing my original coins, you can see how that's been impacted by this height. So let's just set that to be about 2 and have that really minimal. And now we have these stunning looking coins. Now we could also add an adjustment layer to this. And to this, I'm going to do add grain. We're going to change that to final output. And I just like to use any of these Kodak presets. And the intensity, I'm just going to set to 0.1. And we're just going to get a bit of grain in there, maybe go to 0.2. Let's just rename that to be grain. Now, one thing we could really do, but it does slow down our render quite a lot, is add an effect to this bottom layer. And we can add CC motion blur. Is it force motion blur? There we go. And it will add motion blur to our render. But as you can see, my computer really begins to slow down. But that will kind of help sell this effect of motion and make things look a little nicer. I'm going to turn that off for the preview. And just one more thing I'd like to do, which I can see I've missed, is add a bit more depth to this shot. So let's actually go into our 3D coins here. And I'm going to select this cam control on the Z. And I want to pull these values back even more. These are going to go really small. Make sure that all plays okay. It's not affecting my easing too much. And that's all looking okay. And then I'm going to duplicate these coins at the bottom. But I only want 4 of them. So let's just select 4 random ones. Duplicate and bring these to the bottom of my stack. And I'm going to press U. And I want to go back and just delete all of these keyframes off them. So when this camera moves back, we have this. And I forgot to delete those ones. And then now I'm just going to change the color of these. I'm going to press P. And in the Z, I actually want to bring these all forward. We really want some depth in this. So about -2000 looks absolutely fine. And then I just want to position these coins manually, be in the corners of the screen. And it's going to give us a focal point. Now we can tweak all of the rotations on this, because you can see this one's getting a lot of light. So I'm going to press R. And I don't want it to be as distracting in the front there. And same here, if I press R, we can just tweak these. I don't want it to be as distracting. Now the problem is with this, if I go to my camera and add depth of field, we can't actually add it because of the type of renderer we're using. It doesn't actually allow depth of field to be added. So a little workaround I'm going to do is create a new adjustment layer above this, layer new adjustment layer, or Control Alt and Y. And I'm going to call this DOF for depth of field. And then to this layer, I'm going to add the fast box blur. And then I'm just going to increase that. And we can set that to be about 13. And now, when we kind of zoom back, these are going to be slightly out of focus, and we're all going to be focused on that center object. And it kind of helps center everything. Now we can tweak the position of these all we like. And if you really wanted to, you could animate the value of this blur as well. So let's just press U, drag that over. So maybe before it comes into the end here, maybe that'll just be a bit stronger. Kind of like it's focusing in. And you can see then everything kind of becomes a bit more focused. And it just adds that little bit of interest to our shot. And I'll just need to extend these out as well, so that when we zoom back in, they're still there. And you can see it's actually rotating around, which I'm not a huge fan of. Let's just go back here, because we duplicated them, and we can just unparent them from the null. And now we have this really nice framing on our shot and get a bit more interest, so that when we go back, our shot looks way more complete and way more interesting. But it's definitely a stylistic choice, and you can see that my computer is now slowing down. But that's how we create some stunning 3D animation in After Effects. So after all that work, this is what we're left with. And I think it's a pretty stunning result for straight out of After Effects with no 3D software. Now, if you want to learn some more After Effects, why not go ahead and check out this video next. where I'll teach you even more things.